John Noe unveils Greater Than We Believe with your host, Stephen King.
Well, welcome back. Glad to have you here again. I hope you enjoyed our last 3 videos. My name is Stephen King. I'm your host for this evening. This is my friend John Noe, and we have a series we're putting on called Greater Than We Believe. And I hope that you've enjoyed our videos so far. Our last 3 videos, if you've just been able to watch them, were called, kind of taken after the David Letterman style of Top 10 List. And the title was Top 10 List, Mistranslation Errors of the Bible. And I hope you were able to see those and got something out of that, because we really see how one word sometimes can make all the difference in the world. John, I'm just so glad that you are with us again here, and it's kind of funny. You didn't tell me what we're talking about today, so I guess I just have to leave it up to you. So what's the discussion today?
Stephen, I have a confession to make.
Uh-oh, okay.
I knew when I came up with a top 10 list, that wouldn't stay with 10.
Okay.
And I have another one to add to it.
You're adding another one?
Yeah, so it's going to be a top 10 list with 11 in it.
Top 10 plus 1. I don't know. I mean, are you sure that's what you want to do?
Well, no. And so as I was praying about this, you know, as we do.
Yeah, regularly.
I thought, how in the world am I going to justify 11 in a top 10 list?
Yeah. And
I thought, well, maybe I just have to take a page out of higher education's playbook. So I thought, So let me ask you a question, okay?
Okay.
Do you know how many universities there are in the athletic conference called the Big Ten?
It would seem there would be 10? I don't know, I guess.
And the correct answer is 14.
Oh, okay.
Second question. Out of the higher education playlist, do you know how many athletic conferences or universities there are in the athletic conference called the Big 12?
47. I don't know how many.
10.
Okay.
Seems that over the last several years, they've had people added, or universities added and subtracted. And they're now at 10. And neither of those conferences want to change their name from either the Big 10 or the Big 12. You know why?
Why?
Because of image and commercial issues with the brand.
Yeah, branding, okay.
So I thought, okay, so if the Big 10 can do that about 14 and the Big 12 can do that about 10, why can't we, in our top 10 list, do that about 11?
Okay, we'll go for 11.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm a little resistant here. You'll have to forgive me, but I am kind of curious to see what other scripture you wanted to bring in.
Well, okay, so let's go to the first book of the Bible.
Okay.
Genesis.
All right.
You ready? Now, most everybody out there listening and watching knows the story. You know the story. And here, it's about Adam and Eve.
Okay.
And they were in the garden, and God had told them that they could eat of any of the trees of the book, or any of the trees, including the in the garden, including the tree of the knowledge, or excuse me, including the tree of life.
Okay.
But they could not eat from the tree of the knowledge of what?
Good and evil.
Good and evil. Why? What would happen if they ate it?
They would die in that day.
And that is Genesis 2, and I'll pick it up in verse 16. It's 16 and 17.
Okay.
And the Lord God commanded the man, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat of it, you will surely die. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Mistranslation Error number 11.
Okay.
Wow. Now, why is that so important? And that is because, or why is this so important? If that is mistranslation error, why is that so important? Gordon Spiegelman, in his systematic theology book called Reformation Theology, a Pragmatic for Doing Dogmatics, isn't that an impressive title? Says this. Now, you verify for me that I'm not making this stuff up, okay? He says, I'll let you read it. Right there in yellow. What does he say?
If we get first things wrong, last things will also turn out wrong. I agree with that.
And so what I'm saying is this is a mistranslation error that has huge ramifications.
Okay.
Not only for creation, but also for eschatology.
Okay.
So, let's get into it, okay?
Okay.
All right. Well, we know the story. We just looked at the story. So, put my notes over here. All right. What is debated here is what exactly is the time and type of death that Adam and Eve suffered on that day that they actually ate of the Bible. Or ate of the Bible. Let's say ate of the Bible. Ate of the apple. We don't even know if it was an apple.
It's fruit of some sort.
Yeah. It might have been a pear.
Could have been.
You never know. Okay, so what in exact, or what type of death did they suffer in that day? All right, in that day. Yeah. See, I'm so upset about this. Most of us have been led to believe that when they ate of that was a time when death came into human existence, right?
Okay.
Because if they hadn't have eaten of that, they could supposedly have lived forever.
Okay.
And so forth. But is that understanding right? Because you see, in that day, which in the Hebrew is the word yom, in that day when they ate of it, they didn't physically die, did they?
No.
Not at all. And they did die, and they actually lived long after that. In fact, Adam lived to be 930 years old, we're told later on in Genesis 5:5. So let me ask, and they bore children, you know, so they lived so they didn't physically die in that day, did they?
Right.
So let me ask you this. If that's the case, then didn't Satan's words prove to be true when he said,
"You will not die.
You will not surely die"? Didn't Satan end up being the truth teller and God ended up being the liar?
There's got to be a way around that.
Ooh. So, or have we failed to properly understand the type and nature of death that transpired on that day? And you know what the scholars say?
Have no idea.
That's right. Okay. Spot on, man.
Yeah, there we go.
You are right. They are unsure. That's just another way of saying, I don't know. I have no idea. They don't know. But what we do know is that they were cast out of the garden. And we do know that a cherubim was put on the east side of the garden to prevent their re-entry back into it. So it affected Adam and Eve, spirit, soul, and body wise, right? It affected, because there was an actual separation. You know, they were separated from the garden. They were separated in a major extent from fellowship with God. And so traditionally, it has been explained that that Adam and Eve were created immortal. And in that day means that what they ate of it is that's when their mortality. That's it.
Yeah, their
mortality kicked in.
Okay.
But what God actually said here is not in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. What God actually said, and let's just look at a few things.
Okay.
Here, and I want you to verify this for me. In the, this is the New Geneva Study Bible, and has a lot of reference notes and so forth. In the reference note, footnote to that, it says what the actual literal Greek or Hebrew says is what?
Literally, dying you shall die.
Ooh, dying you shall die. See the double application there? Now, where did the New Geneva Study Bible get this idea? Well, this is an interlinear Hebrew, English, Old Testament. Do not open this if you don't want to be confused, because the Hebrew language is very difficult for a number of reasons. Number one, it uses letters that we don't recognize, and number two, you read it from
backwards, yeah.
From
right to left.
Right to left.
Yeah.
But when you translate to English, you got to read it from right to left to right.
Yeah.
So take a look at that one phrase, and I'm going to help you here.
Okay.
Because I practiced this, and you haven't, so I'm going to help you. So here is that phrase, and I'm going to point to you as we read it from right to left, and then from left to right. What does the literal Hebrew say?
The first Hebrew word is to die, and then the second Hebrew word is you will die.
Double use of the word, right?
Yes.
So Geneva's got it right.
Okay.
If you look at a Young's literal, they translate it this way: for in the day of thine eating of it, dying thou dost die. If you look at the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it translates it, in dying you shall die. Now that is possibly a lot different than the mistranslation, which is, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. Possibly. Okay, so what do you think scholars have to say about this double usage of the word dying?
Good question. Now you got me curious.
Well,
fill in the blanks.
They don't know. They're unsure. So they try to downplay it. And they say, well, that's just trying to emphasize the severity of this. So they just use the word twice. Or they say, well, maybe that refers to they would die both physically and spiritually. And that's why it's there. But in Numbers 26:65 here, which was written, during the Exodus period, that same construction is used. Dying, they shall die. And yet people in the 40-year Exodus, they didn't all die on one day.
Right.
They died throughout that 40-year period. So is there another way to maybe understand these things? And how is that important for us? So, I've already talked about Spikeman and what he said, remember? If first things are wrong, we're bound to be wrong on last things.
Right.
And we're going to explore that further, because this is a paradigm issue. Now, a paradigm is like a mindset, a worldview. A paradigm influences how you interpret, how you understand a lot of things.
Okay.
If you think that the world's going to come to an end someday, you're going to interpret this Bible
from that standpoint. Yeah.
Well, so is this.
Okay.
Because most Christians have been told that one of these days Jesus is going to come back and death is going to be no more. Right?
Right.
Why? Because they think Adam and Eve were created immortal, and that's what was lost in the fall. And so in the end, what's going to be restored will be immortality.
Okay.
But that's not what the translation says here. So if the translation is false, well, then the understanding and the futurizing of that in the fulfillment in the end times is also going to be false. All right. Now, because of this mistranslation error that assumes that Adam and Eve were created immortal, and that the day they entered it, the day they ate of it, death entered the world. This last thing is, as I mentioned, when Jesus comes back, he's going to eliminate death. But you know what? 2 Timothy tells us. 2 Timothy chapter 1, written, 2 Timothy chapter 1, written approximately, 65, 67, 68 AD, tells us, but it has now been revealed through the appearing of our Savior, Christ Jesus, who has destroyed death.
Has. Present tense.
Past tense.
Has
Okay. Destroyed death. In other words, it's a done deal. He had already destroyed death. Well, how did Jesus destroy death back then and there? Well, he didn't destroy death by not dying, did he?
Right, he had to die.
He died.
Correct.
And he had to die. That's right. He conquered death by resurrection.
Okay.
Resurrection of the Holy Spirit. He went to the holding place of the dead for 3 days and 3 nights and then was resurrected. That's how he destroyed death. It was a done deal back then and there. And then later on, as we've talked about before, he went back down to Hades because he has the keys to death and Hades and emptied that place out. And we'll talk some more about that in a future video coming up when we talk about resurrection. So forth. And it's 4 different stages that goes on. And it's ongoing and multifaceted realities. But now let's get back to first things. So, again, if we get first things wrong, we're liable to get last things wrong. So let's investigate, Stephen, if there's another possible meaning that might be in harmony with what we've unveiled here above and the proper understanding of that and proper translation of that verse. So, some, including me, feel that Adam and Eve were created mortal, not immortal. And that's what the phrase, dying thou shalt die, means, is that they were dying and shall die. But as long as they had access to the tree of life and the fruit of the tree of life, then that staved off, or was the antidote for their mortality, and they could go on and live forever. Does that make sense?
Yes, does to me.
Thus, the consequence of their sin was both physical and spiritual, for they were physically thrown out of the garden. They were alienated largely, not totally, from God. And from that time on, then, when they didn't have access to eat of the tree of the tree of life, then their mortality kicked in. And that's how they died in that day. But they didn't physically die until, quite later on. And from that time on, all those aspects of death have been part of what we humans have received from them as part of our inherited, might be a better word, from them as far as our existence is concerned. That's why it's appointed unto man to die once and then to face death. So, if this explanation is accurate and Adam and Eve were created mortal, not immortal, then death was part of God's original plan. Because that's how he created them. Mortal. And it is not, as this author, Michael Whitmer, in his book, The Last Enemy, states, it is not, verse 58, if I may get to that, states, it is not an unnatural intruder into God's world as a result of Adam and Eve's sin that ruined us and every good thing God made. Instead, it was part of God's plan from the beginning. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Now, there is another issue that we also must mention, is because supposedly, if we get first things wrong, we're going to get last things wrong, a lot of people believe that someday Jesus is going to come back and remove all evil. Have you heard that? Mm-hmm. Well, who put evil in the Garden of Eden?
Boy, that's a loaded one right there.
Who created the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and put it in the Garden of Eden? Who cast Satan into the Garden of Eden? He didn't have to cast him there, did he? He could have cast him to the moon, or to Pluto, or to another universe, or something like that. Well, these are highly significant because both death, as we have seen, has been abolished, or death has been abolished, and evil is still present when we turn to the last page on earth, when we turn to the last page of the Bible, which is talking about the new heaven and new earth. It's in this last chapter of the Bible, when it talks about verse 11, that would be Revelation 22:11.
Okay.
Let him who does wrong continue to do wrong. Now this is in the new heaven and new earth. And let him who is vile continue to be vile. Let him who does right continue to do right. And let him who is holy continue to be holy. And outside of the New Jerusalem, the city that comes down out of heaven to the new heaven and new earth, outside on earth are the dogs, those who practice magic arts, the sexually immoral, the murderers, the adulterers, and everyone who loves and practices falsehoods. So there, at the end, and supposedly this recreated
New heavens and new earth, yeah.
we still have evil.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? And why is this true? All because of a mistranslation error, which I call mistranslation error number 11. That should not be translated, in the day you eat of it you shall surely die, but in your dying you will die. What do you think about that?
That's interesting. It's a concept I don't think most people would ever sit and think about. It's always been pretty black and white before. I've heard people say that that day he died could have been this 1,000-year period because he didn't get to be 1,000, so he still died that day, which is hyperbole, I guess. But other people I've heard say that he died spiritually that very day and fell out of God's favor. There's a lot of people have a lot of ideas. Which one is correct, or what a combination of which ones is hard to say. But this is something I haven't actually really sat and thought about.
Well, again, as Spikeman says, if we get first things wrong, we're bound to get
The last things wrong. Sure.
And that's when I feel that this mistranslation error number 11 deserved top 10 status.
Sure.
Just like there's 14 schools in the Big Ten, and only 12 in the Big, and only 10 in the Big 12.
Yeah.
So we now have 11.
Okay.
In our top 10 list.
Okay, 11 in our top 10.
Yeah, and I promise. No, I don't.
No.
But I do have one more thing I want to discuss.
Okay.
Before we get into what Jesus is like and doing today in our coming videos, and that is in our next video we'll talk about when was or is the last days.
When was or is.
When are. That's better, isn't it? When are or was. Is that right? Or were. When are or were.
So on a historical timeline, where would you put the last days?
Well, let me get my notes here.
Yeah.
When are or were.
Yeah, are or were, okay.
When are or were the last days?
Which begs the question, have they happened already, or are they still ahead of us? That's, yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
because, we're talking about eschatology.
Right.
And that's we're talking about eschatology from a preterist primarily idea of past and fulfillment. And then as we move into Jesus today, we're going to be talking about the preterist idealist aspect of that, and adding the idealist, the ongoing relevance of all this stuff. Why is that important? Because those are the days we're living in right now. We're not living in that first century world.
Right.
So what is Jesus like and doing now? Well, we'll discuss that after we do this on the last days. So we'll use the last days as kind of a transition.
I like that.
Out of the preterist into the idealist aspect of the book of Revelation, and find out what is Jesus up to and doing today. This day, March 28th, 2019. Excited?
Oh, very much so, yeah.
All right, take us out of here, man.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. We really appreciate you coming and visiting with us again. And I was just as surprised as you to hear what the conversation was going to be about. And that's good. I like a good surprise once in a while. I have to admit that I have questions, too, that don't always get answered quickly, and I know that sometimes it may be frustrating to hear something that you don't necessarily agree with, you don't necessarily disagree with, you're not sure how you feel, and I go through that, too. What I love, though, is the fact that I can pray about it, ask God to reveal it to me in His time and His way, and God's been faithful in many ways in doing that over time. God's really blessed John with a very interesting understanding on a lot of these scriptural points we bring up, and I'm thankful that I'm able to have him as a friend and be able to take the time to listen. God doesn't ask you to just agree with what he says because it's John Noe, PhD, and he writes books. That's not the idea. The idea, though, is... Well, no. The idea...
We didn't rehearse this.
No, none of this. The idea, though, is that we really want to stimulate you to be a Berean, that we want you to look things up and study, pray that God's Spirit will help you to understand the deeper things of the Word, be able to absorb some of the things we say here, do your own study, read other people's books, but try to understand the deep things of the Bible, because that will really benefit you so much in the long run. And I'm just so thankful that John's willing to put on this series and that I can be a part of this. We ask you, please, at the end, you'll notice on our credits that go by, it's got his email address, it's got the name of the website. We invite you, please, send him an email. If you're not really sure you agree with something he said, you're welcome. Please write him an email or question him and say, why do you say that? And John may direct you to one of his books, not just because he's trying to get you to read his books, but because sometimes the explanation is so long and it's one of those things you have to go through one step to get to the next step to get to the next. But whatever the question is, there's some good answers out there. So meanwhile, thank you, John. I appreciate the time you spent with us. We thank you for coming in here, and we hope to see you on the next video. Thank you and good night. All right. Yeah, that one was woo, okay.
Well, I told you we're going to be flying by the seat of our pants, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's not do this every week.
Well,
okay.
it does have its advantages and disadvantages,
it does.
you know? All right, good job.
All right.